Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants around the world. I'm Dawoon, a research fellow at the Center for International Law. I'm very delighted to welcome speakers and participants to the MPA Academy-CIL webinar on ship inspections and certificates during the COVID-19 pandemic. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. First, the webinar is recorded only for internal purposes. Second, if you have any questions, please type your question into the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the screen. We will bring them up during the discussion, or we will also have the time for the questions at the end of the discussion. Without further ado, we will start the webinar with welcome remarks. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Nilofer Orar, Director of the Center for International Law, for welcome remarks.
Thank you so much, Dawoon. As Director of the Center for International Law, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you who are joining us from Singapore and from all parts of the world. CIL is very honored to be co-organizing this webinar with the MPA Academy. This will be the first of two webinars we will be co-organizing with the MPA Academy on the impact of COVID-19 and the international regulation of shipping. I especially would like to thank Mr. Tan Xuan Zhao, Dean of the MPA Academy, and his staff for their cooperation and support in organizing the seminar and in publicizing it to the shipping community in Singapore and abroad. Shipping is vital not only to Singapore, but also to the global welfare. And I hope that these two seminars will be the impetus for more collaboration between CIL and the MPA Academy on issues relating to the international regulation of shipping. Today, we are very fortunate to have some world-class experts on shipping, and I thank each of them today for joining us, including CIL's very own Professor Bob Beckman, who will be our moderator today. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and Dawoon, I turn over the floor to you.
Thank you, Nili, for the welcome remarks. Now, I would like to introduce the moderator, Prof. Beckman, Head of Ocean Law and Policy Program at the CIL. Prof, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dawoon, and thank you, Nilofer, for the introduction. And thank you very much to our three speakers who have kindly agreed to participate in this webinar. It has now been almost 2 years since the COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, and it caused lots of disruptions to the international legal order, including the regulation of shipping. One of the main issues we're going to look at is the impact of COVID-19 on the certifications and inspections, which must be done by flag states and port states under the IMO conventions and under the Maritime Labor Convention. We are very pleased that we have with us a representative from one of the leading classification societies, or recognized organizations as we call them, who play a critically important role in assisting flag states in carrying out their obligations to inspect the vessels flying their flag. So Ms. Claudia Olafmans will be our first speaker. She will be followed by a representative from the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, and then from a representative from the Division of Registry of Supervision of Shipping from the Shanghai Maritime Safety Administration. So we're very pleased that we have not only a member from the class society, but we have representatives of two of the major global port states, as well as major flag states. So we hope that after the presentations, there'll be a sufficient time for questions that you can put in the Q&A box. You can indicate who your question is to, or whether it's to all the speakers, and we'll go through the questions at the end of the presentations. So without further ado, Ms. Olafmans, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beckman, and thank you very much also to MPA Academy and CIL for the organization of this great webinar. Yes, talking about inspections during COVID time, I hope you can all see my screen now.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So as just said before, my name is Claudia Olafmans. I'm the head of section for Class Systematics Data and Operational Center for DNV, located in Hamburg, Germany. Of course, in this position, we were greatly affected as a class society and as all other class societies by the pandemic. And as just said, we are starting the third year of this one. So basically, when these restrictions were imposed on traveling, but also, of course, on entering ships and entering harbors, this disrupted totally our normal work processes for all of us, for all stakeholders involved, obviously. And then there was, first of all, nobody really knew how long will this take and what measures are adequate to do. So the International Maritime Organization, IMO, issued several guidelines and circulars to give guidance what to do and what not to do during this, for all of us, new times. As far as I understood, during III-8, which is a subcommittee of IMO, we will start drafting at IMO now guidelines. This will happen in 2022. Already in April 2021, Tokyo MOU, for example, published a remote port state control inspection guidelines. So the players, of course, started to put up frameworks how to deal with the situation. From classification point of view, also, of course, from our side, DNV, we see that Ajax played also for the guidance of classification societies a virtual role. Ajax is the international association of classification societies, and we have also already in place procedures for suspension and reinstatement or withdrawal of class, and there are time limits to that. And of course, these one had also to be adapted because of non-availability of dry docks, for example, or service suppliers. So that surveys couldn't take place in the normal periods that we know. There was also an information paper on guidelines for remote surveys published in February 2021. And at the moment, Ajax is preparing guidelines for conducting remote classification surveys, which are planned to be adopted as unified requirements within 2022. This is, of course, the agreements between the Ajax class societies. However, as an association, we have, of course, also our seat in the IMO and are represented, and a lot of other stakeholders will look at these guidelines as well. What did the whole pandemic mean for DNV? I think we were in a kind of good spot to adapt to the situation due to digital initiatives within DNV that took place the years before. Just to mention the three main ones here is, of course, DATE, which is a direct access to technical experts, which is a platform where all of our customers can enter the technical questions that they have to a ship. And then this platform will ensure that the case will be handled within a certain time frame, and that the answer to the technical question is stored in the system, so everybody knows. Everybody involved knows the answer, how to handle these cases. And this is, of course, made for cases that are outside of the normal rules, where we need exemptions, agreements from flag states and all this. So we have this in place till 17. And in the times where you need a lot of exemptions, that it was, of course, very helpful. The second column for us was the electronic certificates that DNV introduced in 2017 as well. So that made it possible for us also before the pandemic to issue remote certificates, and that no surveyor that the surveyor not necessarily need to go on board and stamp the certificate for endorsement or for issuance of certificate. And the third one is also remote survey procedures that were piloted by DNV internally already in 2018. So we had these well-known procedures within DNV, but also, of course, and that is the main issue here, approved by many flag states. So they already knew about how DNV is performing remote surveys and in a digital way. What are the methods here? So what you see here is the operational center that we have in Hamburg for some of the remote surveys. Some are done, of course, also at the desk, but we also see that we have big screens, because one of the issues is obviously, do I see enough? Do I have enough information to make a remote survey or verification? So the remote survey scope varies depending upon the type of the survey. And the common methods that we are using is images, video, either in stream or recording, depending on the survey again. We have telephone conversations with masters and chief engineers. We have written statements from the same, and of course also maker reports and repair reports from third parties. The guideline for us internally is here. A remote survey can only be conducted if we can assure that the level of assurance is equal to an onboard survey, obviously, because we have the same rules, the same IMO rules, the same flag state rules apply to a remote survey than to an onboard survey. So you can do it remotely if you can assure that it is the same quality of the survey, the same depths. How do we do that also on a resource level? So what we are saying is we are only conducting remote surveys from designated remote surveyors. So they get a qualification in our qualification matrix. And they are only placed in our date hubs. So in Høvik, Oslo, in Hamburg, in Piraeus, in Singapore, and in Houston. So these are delegated remote surveyors. We have regular calibration meetings among these remote surveyors, and due to the location of them, we can ensure 24/7 basis for this. So basically, we are in the position to order, to offer to the customers to order remote surveys when ordering surveys in general. And there is, if this remote surveys, if the survey types are designed to be remote surveys, then they can have the choice. If they are standalone and not combined with survey requests for surveys that needs to have onboard service, and if the vessel is not a high-risk vessel or has reported poor maintenance, for example, then we cannot do remote surveys. So what are possible remote surveys? It's condition handling, for example, imposing postponement of conditions, in some cases also deletion. It is occasional surveys, for example, change of multiple load line, change of owner, change of manager, of course, only if DOC is not concerned, change of name also in some areas. And as you see, for periodical surveys, we only do periodical surveys for the radio survey, and completion of periodical surveys if there are documentary issues outstanding. And the big thing is, of course, nowadays, in the last 2 years in COVID, postponement of statutory surveys. So I would say the most use is imposing of conditions, because we cannot go on board due to port restrictions or due to other restrictions of the vessel, and a postponement of periodical surveys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A very clear and very precise presentation. I would like to ask just one quick question. In your slides, you mentioned owners and operators who are making requests to you. Now, to what extent is the flag state making a request, or is the owner or operator making the request? Because you're fulfilling the obligations on behalf of the flag state.
Yeah, that is true. When we are entering on board, of course, we are wearing two hats. We have the classification hat, and we have for the construction part, which also goes in, of course, in solar safety construction, and then we have all the additional requirements from the IMO. The way it is organized is that the owner or the manager is requesting the survey. If the survey or the survey request, the scope or the way of doing the survey is not covered by our agreements that we have with the flag states, because we have agreements with the flag state, how the flag state is authorizing DNV to carry out the surveys. So if there is a gap between the authorization level that DNV has from the flag state and the request from the manager, we will contact the flag state and ask for their approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we get to the next speaker, I'd like to encourage the members of the audience, I see we have more than 150 participants, to place their questions in the Q&A box. As we go through the questions after the speakers, we will read the question. We will not identify the name of the person who asked the question or their organization. So feel free, that your boss won't know that you asked an embarrassing question. Feel free to ask questions of the speakers, and you can either direct your question generally to the panel, or you could direct it to one of the three speakers. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our second panelist, Mr. Chen Kit Cham from the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. Mr. Chen.
Right.
He's the Deputy Director of Shipping. I'm sorry, I should have said that.
That's okay. I'll introduce myself. Thank you, Professor Beckman. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all, wherever international time zones you're currently located. I am Kit Cham, the Deputy Director of Shipping from the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. Before I begin my presentation, please allow me to extend my appreciation to the MPA Academy, the Center for International Law of NUS, for organizing this webinar, and a warm welcome to all for your attendance. Can I have the slides, please? Next slide. And the next slide. Okay, right. So in reflection on the year 2000, when the impact of the pandemic is severe, with still no possible cure of all vaccines in sight, many countries have taken stringent measures, such as the closure of borders and imposing strict travel restrictions. Consequently, many surveyors and inspectors were unable to physically board vessels to carry out the necessary surveys for maintaining the validity of ship certificates, as well as inspections to ensure the conditions of ships continue to comply with international and national regulations. For example, it is Singapore's keen interest to comply, to rapidly adapt and respond to challenges posed by the pandemic, both as a large flag state and port state, in order to ensure ships are safely operated and continue to carry valid certificates through a practical alternative inspection regime or mechanism, while minimizing exposure to the ship's crew and vice versa when carrying out our maritime obligations. So instead of choosing the path of continuously granting extensions to expired certificates, we are driven to explore alternative methods of inspections, which progressively led us to converge on the practical interim solution of carrying out remote flag state and port state control inspections. So on the other side, likewise, for the Tokyo MOU, the number of PSC inspections carried out regionally is also decreasing at a significant rate for the first quarter of 2020. thereby raising concerns if the Tokyo MOU can continue to effectively fulfill its primary mission in ensuring the safety of life at sea, protection of the marine environment, compliance with the ship's labor conditions, and to eliminate substandard ships operating in the region. And this prompted the MOU to establish an extraordinary intersessional group to address the impact of COVID-19, with one of the measures being adopted to conduct remote PSC inspections, which was considered as a practical alternative in the interim during global pandemic situation and a temporary alternative for normal physical PSC inspection. Next slide. And the next. So having said the above, I will now briefly explain the guiding principles for Tokyo MOU guidelines on remote PSC inspection. The guiding principles are as follows. A PSC authority may exercise its choice whether to conduct remote PSC inspections or not. And the selection of ship for remote PSC inspection is entirely based on the discretion of the port state authority. Remote PSC inspection is non-mandatory and is for complementing physical inspection where applicable. Agreement should be obtained between port state authority and the ship before a remote inspection is to be carried out. This is so as to prepare and ready the ship, as remote inspection should not be conducted on the fly unless there are overriding reasons where it becomes mandatory. It is normally applicable to initial inspection, and authority may consider for more detailed inspections. Ultimately, a ship should be able to demonstrate its actual conditions via suitable means to the satisfaction of the port state control officer throughout the inspection. And as far as practical, remote PSC inspection should endeavor to minimize interruptions to the crew's watchkeeping and rest hours. So this is a key point. This is important and will be arranged accordingly with the ship beforehand. And lastly, all efforts should be made to avoid a ship being unduly delayed or detained. Next slide, please. For the conduct of inspections on equipment and system operations, for example, involving moving parts and function tests, etc., should be carried out through video, live streaming, or other suitable means. If there are no network coverage, video clips and photos may be used as alternatives. If any clear grounds are found, a more detailed inspection may be carried out. Where detainable deficiencies are found, they are to be dealt with in accordance to relevant national legislation, regulations, and PSC procedures adopted by IMO. After the end of inspection, the master will be duly informed of the deficiencies and findings, and an official email with a signed copy of the inspection report generated will be sent to the ship, either through the agent or email the ship if available. Instructions will also be given for the ship to revert with a copy of Form A of the PSC inspection report signed by the master. And after receiving the signed copy by the master, the PSC report will be uploaded to the Asia Pacific Computerized Information System, also known as APSIS. Next slide, please. Finally, these are some of the points to note from a remote follow-up inspection. So, closeout of deficiencies actually detected in the remote inspection is in accordance with guidelines for remote follow-up inspection. Closing of detainable deficiencies and release ship from detention is applicable where the nature of deficiencies falls under the scope of remote follow-up procedure and onboard verification is not visible. And for a quick appreciation and a flavor of a remote PSC inspection, a short video clip with scenes actually taken from an actual remote inspection will be shown for illustration. And it's important to note that this is not a commercial production. We actually edit the actual inspection itself, and the video was produced by our PSC officers without any professional assistance. So please enjoy the video. Can I trouble the organizer to display the video? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. My colleague Matthew will share the video.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Okay, I hope you have enjoyed the short video and presentation, and I thank you all for attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chen. Now our final panelist for the panel before we open it up for questions is Mr. Hu Ronghua from the Shanghai Maritime Safety Administration of the People's Republic of China. Mr. Hu?
Okay, thank you. So thank you for before I made my presentation, I would like to thank to the MPA Academy as well as the CIL first. It's my great honor to attend this webinar on ship inspection and the certificate during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now I'm sharing my screen. Can you just give a minute? Okay, is that clear?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, as you may aware, for the global shipping industry, 2020 to 2021 will be the long remembered. And the remarkable issue would be the COVID-19 pandemic has led to the significant disruption to the industry's ways of working. But today, I'm not going to talk about what we did during the period of the pandemic. The ideas looks like similar with Mr. Chen. But I would like to share with what we have learned from the pandemic. So my topic will be the RPPSC inspection after COVID-19 pandemic. And the R refers to the remote inspection, and P refers to the physical PSC inspection. Okay. And the contents of my presentation will be divided into 4 parts. The first one will be the general introduction on the physical PSC inspection, and then we'll pass to the remote PSC inspection, just a general introduction. And the third one will be the compare with the remote initial inspection with the remote follow-up inspection. And it looks like the same, but a little bit difference between two of them. And then the third one is to share the outcome, what we learned from this pandemic, and we hope we will conduct how we take the inspection in the near future. So, okay, let's go to the first part of my presentation, is the physical PSC inspection. Before COVID-19 pandemic, what we've done, conducted the PSC inspection is only the physical PSC inspection. That means the PSC will come on board to conduct the inspection. Also, we conducted it as well as the follow-up inspection. From the picture, and this is a short screen by the official website of the Tokyo MOU. You can see that also when we're dealing with the follow-up inspection, it's asked for the physical verification by a PSC officer. So only for a PSC to come on board, then the deficiency can be closed. After that, we will find for the physical PSC inspection, we will meet three of the challenges. The one is we see the extra working hours of ship's crew. That means we may interrupt the rest hour of the ship's crew, and that will be for the ship's crew impossible to follow those MLC requirements on rest hours. Second one will be the transportation. Once you do the remote inspection just with the internet, but when we for the PSU, so if the ship at the anchorage, then we need a patrol boat to send them to the ship. And the third one is the non-working hours arrangements of the follow-up inspection, such as the weekends and the holidays. You see, sometimes once a ship was detained, then after that will be followed by that there will be a weekend. So it's very difficult for the PSU to conduct the follow-up inspection, and it may cause the undue delay for those ships. So these are three challenges when we meet the physical PSC inspection. Just in the early of the 2020, the COVID-19 starts pandemic around the world. Then we conducted we tried to conduct the remote PSC inspection. So this is, why the reason caused by the the COVID-19 made a significant impact on the PSC activities, especially we got a notable decrease in the number of PSC inspections. And this is due to the restriction of ship-shore interaction. That means it says the PSC, for PSU, it's very difficult to come on board to conduct a physical inspection. And then to refuse the influence of the significant decrease of inspections, the Tokyo MOU has agreed to explore and develop guidance for facility member authority to carry out remote inspections, just as mentioned by previous two speakers. This is as an alternate way to the PSC inspection under the pandemic circumstance. Also, it's recognized by the most of the members that although a remote PSC may not be as effective as physical inspections, which is preferred options when this is no risk to the safety of the PSC officer as well as the crew. So secondly, it's we see the remote inspection should be consistent with the member authorities' domestic rules, just as mentioned by Mr. Chen. However, it needs to be mentioned that it has not been accepted by the Paris MOU. And part of the member inside the Tokyo MOU still have conducted physical inspection only. For instance, Australia, they only conducted the physical PSC inspection. This is we call the remote inspection. And China conducted, I think, about 60% to 70% remote inspection numbers in the region of the Tokyo MOU. After those experience, we found that we call that the three type of challenges we meet with that. The unexpected challenge is the communication. You see, we find that probably the remote inspection is a quite good way to conduct a PSC inspection, but for the communication, especially with those crew, their first language is not English, the communication will be quite difficult. Also, secondly, one thing, when we talk about, for instance, oil and water separate, when we do that face to face, it's easy to explain that. But once we conduct a remote inspection, it's quite difficult to how to communication in that way. And the second challenge is with the connectivity and the live streams. That we found that insufficient bandwidth for network coverage, such as you see the video sent back to our office is not so clear to demonstrate the deficiency, also demonstrate the ship's condition. Also, that we can find that the network coverage cannot be available in the enclosure spaces. So that means no any network cover. So we cannot go into to find any deficiencies. Also, we find that the Wi-Fi on board the ship, that's also would meet the difficulty to conduct the remote inspection. And also with these items, we also find that the mobile phone problem. You see, some company only provide the older version phone, but not once we conduct the remote inspection, we definitely need a smartphone for that purpose. The other challenges is repeated remote inspection could be occurred during long period. Although we ask in the normal condition, only once after the remote inspection, there will be a physical inspection for that ship. If for a ship with the short voyage, it's very difficult for her to conduct the physical inspection because that's only the short voyage. It's very difficult. Also, the second challenge with that is the cyber security concern. That is the, you see, difficulties in sending the documents due to the high security of the government network, such as the firewall broken, and also on the use of mobile phone applications. For instance, in China, normally we use the WeChat, but for some foreign captain, they won't use the WeChat. So they concern about their privacy. Also, the third part of this one is the national law. You see, this is the national, some ships will cause that they have national law on the personal data protection, as well as the policy concern. Also, this as mentioned by the Mr. Chen, this once the ship also needed the support by the national law for detention a ship. So that is the other challenges. So combined with those challenges we meet with, we find that the remote inspection could be done, but we still have some those challenges need to solve out. So this is the remote inspection during the COVID-19 pandemic. The third part of the topic will be to compare with the initial inspection with the remote follow-up inspection. From this slide, you can see the same picture, same Q&A I downloaded from the official website of the Tokyo MOU. You can see now allows which is to be conducted physically in principle. That means we can conduct follow-up, remote follow-up inspection. So if we compare that, so we can find that that is non-mandatory for the remote inspection, initial inspection. That is to say, the ship's master can refuse to conduct the remote initial inspection. But for the remote follow-up inspection, it's asked for not place an obligation to our PSCOs. That is to say, if a PSCO want to do that, so he can refuse to conduct the remote follow-up inspection. And then the second one, I think the remote inspection, initial inspection is a temporary measure. The Secretary of Tokyo MOU, they announced that once the after COVID-19 pandemic, the remote initial inspection will no longer exist. But for the remote follow-up inspection, that will be still will be existed for that. But and the third one is for that normally remote initial inspection, we focus on the high-risk ship. That is different with the ROs. The ROs say I reject to do remote survey on high-risk ship. But for us, for the PSC, they will focus on the high-risk ship. And for the remote follow-up inspection, that is also different, but not fit for the ship detention. That means that once the ship got a detainable deficiency, he have no rights to apply for the remote follow-up inspection. So after that, I would like to share what we learned from the this COVID-19 pandemic. We do hope we can conduct the combination. Just mean that we combine the remote inspection with the physical inspection together. So I just called it, you see, 3 steps why we conducted the PSC inspection. It means a normal physical inspection could be divided into 3 parts. The first one, we do step 1 is the remote inspection. That means we ask for the ship's documentation and certificates online, so that the master can send those to the PSC mailbox. Then PSC check that and can fill up the PSC form A. Also, if the conditions permit, we also can use a drum to take the exhaust gas samples that we couldn't. Also, certainly, as we know, the electronic records now are allowed on board a vessel. We also can ask for the, for instance, the garbage recorder book as well as the oil recorder book. They also can send it to our office. We can check that remotely and in the office. After that, then we can apply for the physical inspection. That means the PSC will come on board to conduct the equipment inspection as well as the operational control. Then we can sign the PSC report after communication with all the crews face to face. Once the deficiency issued, but not the detainable deficiency, then the ship can ask for the remote follow-up inspection. So I call that a closed circle, or can call it a closed loop to meet the requirements of this. After that, I think once we combine the remote inspection with the physical inspection together, I think we can get the 4 advantages. The first one is to improve the efficiency of a PSC inspection. You know why? That means the PSC stay on board. The time for the PSC will stay on board will be short, and then the normal physical inspection. Also, the second one is to avoid a shortage that comes from the remote inspection, such as the insufficient bandwidth for network coverage, also available for of the mobile device. This is because we check the documentation, ship's documentation and certificate by the internet. It's easy, but not easy for us to conduct the equipment inspection as well as the operational inspection. The third one, we can, you see, once the PSCs, the time for also we can call it a period for the PSCs stay on board. The time is shorter than the usual. That means to minimize the interruption to the cruise watch keeping and the rest hours. So if possible, also a mutual agreement could appoint a suitable tentative physical inspection time to provide a rest time for the crew. That means we can find some ships will alongside of the wharf in the very early morning time. Also, some ports, the ship needs to a long time maneuvering. So the ship's crew are tired at that time. That makes us, we can make the appointments with the ship master. Normally we will ask for, as experienced by the Shanghai port, we find that the master quite happy once the PSC come on board after lunchtime, because that for them will wake up and will minimize the interruption for the sleep, also the rest hour of them. Also, that is not only a closed loop, but also to avoid undue delay if ship has not to be detained. That is it. Normally, initial inspection will conduct in the daytime, and then after that, it's the PSC non-working time. If allows to conduct the remote inspection, then we can conduct it any time of the for the PSCs. That allows ship to close up the deficiency very quickly as this. So I think that is my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the speakers for keeping to the time limit. We now have almost 40 minutes left for Q&A. Before we begin taking, we have 3 questions that were submitted advanced by registrants, and we have 8 questions that we've received. I'm wondering whether Ms. Olafmans would like to comment on the 2 presentations from the PSC perspective. Do you have any comments you'd like to make from a class society as to the 2 other presentations, or questions you'd like to ask the 2 speakers?
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to confirm, and I think that was a very 2 very good presentations, and to confirm that what Mr. Hu said with regard to the communication. I think that is something that all of us experience, that and I'm not talking about connectivity here, but about how much we communicate with gestures, and with how much easier it is to communicate when we are in the same room. And especially when we all speaking a foreign language, like English in my case, and the other person as well, it is yeah, it is a burden, and it makes it a lot more difficult. Same comes for organizing trainings or webinars. I think there is much more organization needed when you do this remotely, compared to doing it face to face. And yeah, I mean, as a classification society, we of course, and that was pointed out by the other 2 presentations as well, we can only do so much as that what is approved by the flag state, and what is also agreed with the port state when it comes to a PSC detention. So very valid points.
Okay, Mr. Chen, do you have any comments you'd like to make on the other two presentations, or Mr. Hu?
Currently, no, Prof. Maybe during the discussion, I can share more information on this. Yeah.
Okay, then let's move to the questions. We had 3 questions in advance. I think we'll begin with them. The first question is whether MLC inspections can also be conducted remotely, and whether they are being conducted remotely. One of you want to answer that one?
Okay, maybe I can take this question. Claudia and Mr. Hu can come in as required. So in my view, yes, MLC inspections can be conducted remotely. Yes, being done now. The onus is for the PSCO, or let's say, the flag state, the FSCO, to arrange in advance who he intends to interview during the MLC inspection. So the question is then to ensure a location on board where there is adequate internet coverage, because this is a remote inspection without interference, and preferably with good lighting as well. So usually the location will be on the bridge, based on my experience, where the crew concerned can be interviewed accordingly. At this point, the relevant documents relating to MLC, such as Seafarers Employment Agreement, the SEA, the salary payments, etc., could also be verified at this time. Then, for the inspection of food provisions and welfare facilities being provided on board, a shipboard round check could be arranged, subject to no disruption to internet connectivity when moving in and out of the accommodation block. In the event of disruption, the alternative will be photographs or videos can be taken and then shown later to the inspector on the bridge when connectivity is better or resumed. Yeah, that's my response.
Mr. Hu, do you have anything to add from Shanghai Port perspective?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Chen's idea, but one thing I need to add is it's quite difficult we conduct the inspection, especially for MLC, especially on the appeal of the MLC issues. The crew will not you see, expect to show on the video or somewhere else. They just want to talk to you. But for this time, it's very difficult for us to go on board to talk to the ship's crew face by face. For the others, everything is okay now. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ohlmeyer, anything to add on that question?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, DNV is of the opinion that periodical surveys and inspections should be carried out with attendance, and therefore we believe that an attendance survey gives more value. Coming also, you get the gut feeling about when you go on board, how is everything working. The crew has the chance to also talk to you, especially about MLC topics in that regard. There is a different viewpoint to this, and that is why DNV is of the opinion that periodical surveys inspections should be carried out where possible with attendance. However, there is a time when you have to decide, does another postponement make sense or not? And then, of course, this is very much also on the instructions and agreements that we are getting from the flag state, because it's a statutory matter.
Okay, thank you very much. The second question that we had in advance: if boarding of the vessel is not allowed at a port, how can we carry out inspection effectively? What are the various methods we can use to carry out a remote inspection to identify the problem on board? I think actually we've covered most of that in the 2 presentations. So unless somebody has anything to add, I think we've learned quite a bit about remote inspections today. The third question is, how effective is the remote inspection on vessels conducted by the PSC officers during the pandemic? How will this new way of inspection change the shipping industry in the future, the post-pandemic? I think we've we've hinted at that a little bit. Are we going to get new regulations, and are we going to go back to physical inspections, or are we always going to have a combination of remote and physical inspections in the future? Anybody want to comment on that?
Should I take this question? You see, as my understanding, you see, the Paris MOU hasn't accepted the remote inspection at the moment. Also, if my memory is correct, the IIII-7 in July of the last year, that you can find one proposal for the develop the guidelines on the remote inspection, but not remote surveyor. I think for the IIII-7, they rejected this proposal. That means we allows for the remote surveyor in the future, but not remote inspection after COVID-19 pandemic. So that's why I developed the idea for the combination of the remote inspection with the physical inspection together to save the time and minimize the interruption to the ship's crew. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chen, anything to add?
I kind of agree with Mr. Hu because it's true that the III-7 subcommittee actually rejected the proposal for remote inspection. I guess there's still certain reservations by the respective the PSC authorities, for example, Paris. They may have certain concerns on that. However, I think Tokyo MU has a different view on this. So usually Tokyo MU and Paris MU, we are like brothers, you know. Usually when we have any new initiatives, we will actually go jointly together. But this time it seems that there's diverging views. In terms of just to affirm what Mr. Hu has actually mentioned, the Secretariat itself has actually mentioned that once the pandemic condition has actually improved and chances of physical inspection is actually can be resumed, then we will revert back to physical inspections instead of continuing to conduct remote inspection. But at the same time, I do agree with Mr. Hu that there are certain benefits of remote inspection. For example, that we can actually gain from our experience is that before the inspection is carried out, usually we can actually in advance check the certification and documentation. And to be honest, it does take a lot of effort and time to just go through the entire bulk of statutory documents and all those. Typically, let's say if inspection takes about 4 hours, about 20% of the time will be just going through the certificates and the COCs and so on and so forth. So if this can be actually done in advance through a remote means, then what the PSCO needs to do is actually go up and just conduct the physical inspection and actually reduce the inspection time, reduce its dwell time on board the ship as well, and also allow the crew to take a rest instead of being, after a long voyage to the port and they are being engaged further to follow the PSCO around the ship and so on. So I guess a hybrid sort of inspection, incorporating remote and physical, maybe in the future could be a viable proposition. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Ms. Olmeyer, anything? Shall we move?
Yeah.
Let's move to the next question. And first question is to Ms. Olmeyer. What is the position of third-party recognized specialists from class?
I'm not sure if I entirely get the question. So please, Seinhold, if you can please add something if I'm not getting the core. But what I'm assuming is we are talking about service suppliers here, third parties, recognized specialists. And of course, there is, first of all, approval by DNV for third-party suppliers, so that we know that the ISM system is working in that way. So we are, of course, approving that. And then, for example, for some special equipment, there is also a service supplier that are approved by a flag state. So, of course, if we are working with that service supplier on the vessel that is flagged by that flag, then, of course, we are accepting that as well.
Okay. Next
So
question. How are you able to evaluate drills or testing of equipment through remote inspections? Somebody want to take that one? Evaluate drills or testing of equipment. Do you ask them to put the hand phone near the equipment to see whether it's working, or?
So may I take this question?
Sure.
I don't think we can conduct the drill inspection via remote way. Recently, I experienced a remote inspection. The deficiencies clearly comes out. Then the crew switch off the phone, says we got the problem from the internet. That is, I think, a very good example to show that. Say, to demonstrate, it's for us, it's very difficult to conduct the drill inspection by the remote way, because the crew, once the crew realize the problem, they will find an excuse, says I got internet problem. So for us, to means the evidence is lost. So in my opinion, that only conducted by the physical way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question, how name change survey can be carried out remotely where various documents such as fire safety plan, damage and stability booklet on board need to be endorsed under a new VSL name. Can DNV allow new VSL's name be written on the document by the master, and DNV issue a statement list of documents where new name can be written?
Yeah,
that one's to you, Claudia.
Thank you. Yes. Well, of course, there are limitations to this one. What we are saying, if we have to do a remote survey for the name change, this will be done by the next when the next surveyor goes on board. There is a survey statement for the change of name. In the survey statement, it will be clearly said that this will be only carried out with the next attendance of surveyor. And due to the fact and the risk analysis that the name, if it is the old or the new on the plan, is not safety critical, we say, okay, this is of course done then during next time. But of course, any display of name on the ship, that has to be changed.
Okay, thank you. Next question, how many remote survey already done by DNV during COVID, and how to control if there's a lack of connection or resolution, the problem Mr. Hu mentioned in terms of connectivity?
Yes, the number that I will say now sounds big. That's why I give this heading, the spoiler before, saying, please keep in mind that these remote surveys are mainly with 95% non-periodical. So we are talking about postponements because we are not able to get a surveyor on board, and we are talking about issuance of conditions or damage or something, again, because we cannot go on board. In 2021, we had roughly 15,000 remote surveys.
Okay. Question to all panelists. I think Mr. Hu's covered that a little bit, but we'll ask it again. Based on your observation, what is the percentage split between remote versus onboard inspections? Do you envisage remote inspections becoming the norm even after COVID? I think Mr. Hu has said no, he doesn't think so. They need at least a combination. But
yes, that is a combination, because you see, compared with the physical inspection, it can be demonstrated by the data analysis that the detention ratio is very low. Also, zero deficiency was found very often for the remote inspection. In some aspects, the outcome of remote inspection appears to be money laundering. And this can be found by the risk profile of the ship is getting better and better. And it does not reflect the real situation. It could be estimated that the condition of ship may go worse and worse. And we assume it was caused by the following two issues. And the first one is the mental problem of the ship's crew due to the difficulty in crew change. Some crew may not care about their responsibility when they stay on board a vessel. And the second one is the shore-based support that we call the lack of the shore-based support due to the restriction of the ship-shore interaction. And also it leads to the lack of the monitor conducted by the shipping company as well as the ROC. Now the RO come on board also very difficult. So I do expect that we can combine the remote with the physical together, but currently not. You see, we can inspect the documentation and the certificates via the remote way, but for the rest one that we can call the the equipment inspection, especially in the engine room, and as well as the drill inspection via the physical way. Also, we can conduct the follow-up inspection via remote way, because the follow-up inspection is definitely different with the initial inspection. This is we call the point-to-point inspection. We only followed by the initial report, but not to create a new deficiency. Hope that it helps. Thank you.
thank you very much. Mr. Chen, anything to add? Do you agree?
Okay, just to add on, I mean, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, remote inspection is not supposed to entirely replace a physical inspection. It's actually a supplement to supplement physical inspection whenever a physical inspection is not possible. For example, during exceptional circumstances such as COVID-19 situation. So as we discussed earlier also, when the time comes when physical inspection can be resumed, then most likely, remote inspection per se, independent remote inspection will not be an acceptable means of inspection by the relevant MOUs as well, including Tokyo MOU. And also in response to the earlier question about what is the split between remote and physical, I have some stats here, which actually extracted from the Tokyo MOU database, because I think currently only Tokyo MOU member authorities are actually conducting remote inspection per se. So from the time it was first launched in last year, 1st of April 2021, until December this year, I think a total of 12,000 physical inspections have been conducted, and a total of versus 3,000 remote inspections that were actually conducted by the other member authorities. So it's about 25% remote and 75% yeah. And the highest member authorities that conduct remote inspection is China, followed by Singapore, and there's a hybrid also for Japan, Vietnam. Vietnam is pretty high as well. So certain countries have different policies. So I guess this is the current situation. But once the situation improves, I think everybody will just revert back to physical. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And this is a question directed to Mr. Chen. The issue of discretion for selection of ships by the Port National for inspection can be abused since it's entirely based on discretion. How can this be circumvented to avoid abuse of power by the port authorities, and what remedies are available to the ship owner?
Okay, maybe I just try to understand the question. I think, just to clarify what I said earlier, it is, the selection of ships for remote inspection is at the discretion of the Port State Control Authority. It should be noted that the selection of ships, irregardless whether it's going to be remote or physical, is based on certain targeting matrix. That means the risk profile of the vessel. So if the ship comes into a Tokyo MOU member authority port and the ship risk profile is high, then there is an obligation for the port authority to check this vessel. So that is already a selection. It's already predetermined by the ship's risk profile. Then the next step is, should I go up physically or should I just stay in office and do the remote inspection for this vessel? Then that will be on the discretion of the PSC authority. But in either case, is when the ship comes in and there's an obligation to check, it is all member authorities are supposed to follow the guidelines that's being set out in the Tokyo MOU ship selection targeting guidelines. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Next question to everyone, I guess. The conduct of remote inspection relies heavily on the assistance and cooperation of seafarers on board, particularly if some testing will be done. Is there some guidance or information given to seafarers prior to conducting the remote inspection? Could you give us an idea of the type of guidance or information given to seafarers, if any? Somebody want to tackle that one? Mr. Hu? Mr. Chen?
Okay, maybe I can start the ball rolling. I'm just speaking on behalf of what the MPA Port State Control Department do. So definitely for remote inspection, it cannot be done, as I mentioned, it cannot be done on the fly. That means ships comes in and straight away you tell the ship, say that, hey, you have been selected. So you hit the jackpot and we will want to do remote inspection on your vessel. I think that's not tenable. Important thing is that we always recognize that there are preparations involved in the remote inspection. So in fact, remote inspection is more arduous than actually a physical one, because a couple of days before, we will get information from our system that the vessel is coming in, and based on as I said earlier, based on the ship risk profile of the vessel, if the vessel is high risk, then probably it will be selected for inspection. And if we're going to select this ship for inspection, we will likely need to in the ship in advance, because they need to prepare the ship for remote. And then in doing so, we actually send guidance developed by ourselves, MPA, but also because MPA is part of the drafting group, including China as well and Marshall Islands, for the guidance on PSC remote inspection procedures, including the checklist. So more or less we align, and we also send the guidance accordingly to the vessel, so that they know what we want to check and what sort of equipment that we'll be looking into, what certificates we want. If they can send us in advance, it will be better, and so on and so forth. And what is the form of communication platform that we would be using. For example, the pervasive mobile communication device, aka the mobile phone. What sort of apps would they be using, so that we can actually try to match that? Because as Mr. Hu has mentioned, if it's a China ship using WeChat and then we're using WhatsApp, definitely there'll be a clash. It'll be difficult to communicate and so on and so forth. So we have to agree on the platform, the procedures, and so on. So I just want to end by saying that remote inspection is not a walk in the park. Basically, a lot of pre-arrangement has to be done, and we will need the ship to cooperate with us, and at the same time, we also need to provide the proper guidance. It should not be done on the fly. Thank you.
Anything to add, Mr. Hu?
Okay, yeah. I think the announcement to relate to the remote inspection can be found at the website of the Tokyo MOU, official website. You can find that. The one thing I need to emphasize that is that before conducting a remote inspection, the mutual agreement is very important. So the captain, once you get any problem or anyone not clear, you can ask for the PSC station to give you the explanation, and then we conduct the remote inspection. So the mutual agreement will before conducting the remote inspection. That is a very important procedure need to follow. Thank you.
Okay, I've got another quite technical question here, I think, from my perspective. Do you also consider restriction on tankers on the use of non-intrinsically safe mobile communication equipment?
Okay, maybe I'll come in again. I think that is a valid question. In conducting our remote inspection, that is one of the consideration as well. So insofar as remote inspection is concerned, as far as for MPA, we do not have the means to actually conduct a remote inspection, relying on the ship's mobile so-called handphone, which is not intrinsically safe, unless it has been ascertained. That means even before the inspection, the company can come back to us that they have means to ensure that the mobile phone is actually encased in an intrinsically safe kind of jacket or something, and it can ensure the safety of the equipment not becoming a source or a spark for fire or explosion on board the tanker. Then we will proceed with that. If this condition is not fulfilled, then most likely we will not conduct the remote inspection in consideration of safety consideration. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take the next question then, if nobody wants. This is a layman's question. The pandemic is forcing us to evolve new rules relating to shipping. Isn't this the case? I guess I can even answer that one. I tell my students when I taught international regulation of shipping that the international rules often follow disasters and technological change. I think here there was a disaster, the pandemic, and the technological change is coming anyway, but it's being accelerated in order to create new rules. So I think that is really what we're seeing. And you see the IMO is starting to draft things. So I think, yeah, we are responding to disasters much like we did to the Titanic long ago. Are all vessels inspected? If so, what criteria is used when inspecting remote? Is it the same as for physical inspection? I think you've more or less covered that, but if somebody want to quickly summarize.
I think what we have to, in all these questions, what we have to always have a look at is, one thing is port state inspections, and the other one is classification surveys. Classification surveys are given by time windows as defined in the statutory requirements. Port state inspections are defined by the PSC MOUs according to their risk analysis and the risk category. And that was also explained by Mr. Chen, that is a very transparent, systematic. It's even published on the website of the Tokyo MOU. Sorry, so that is open and transparent. And the class societies normally also have a tool where you can check for your time windows.
Okay, good. Next question. Based on some benefits experienced from remote inspections, have you observed public and private investments in training and support on electronic systems and record keeping?
May I start?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I think as I pointed out on the presentation on my first slide, DNV, and I'm sure also other classification societies, already started, of course, on digitalization of topics. We also know a couple of flag states that have already implemented electronic certificates and also certificates for seafarers. So there are two developments coming here parallel. One is that digitalization is all around the world, I would say, and started before the pandemic as well. Maybe shipping is not the fast moving industry in that regard when it comes to digitalization. However, that was of course a benefit to overcome the pandemic and to find solutions instead of not surveying or not inspecting at all.
Okay, thank you. We got to create some quick questions, maybe get quick answers. What's the deficiency rate, including detention rate, of remote inspections compared to physical? Somebody have that statistics or rough?
Okay, I take this question. You see,
Yeah, we got a connection problem.
Yep.
Sorry, Mr. Hu, you're...
Yeah. It's not clear?
Not clear. We couldn't hear.
Okay. What I mean is I just take an example for the detainable deficiency once found on by the remote inspection that we call it certificate expired. That means the overdue of certificates that will cause the detention of the ship. For the rest one, I think sometimes it's very difficult. For instance, you see the operation of the oil water separator. Once the crew realize it, they will switch off the camera directly. Says, "I got an internet problem." So it's very difficult to find it. But with regard to the certificates, it's very easy to find that we call the detainable deficiency found via remote inspection. Thank you.
Okay. Another question, if the remote inspection is interrupted for technical reasons and you're unable to resume before the vessel's scheduled departure, what will happen to the inspection? Do you delay the departure or do you?
I think we will not issue any report for this. Just we quit that remote inspection to leave it down.
So you let them go, but you won't issue a report
because it's unable to be resumed according to the Titan's ship schedule.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Mr. Hu. In this situation, we'll probably abort the inspection, and we can conduct again another time. Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to class, of course, we can hard-held survey. However, if it's at the end of the time window, then we have a problem. So that's a little bit different story. And then, then there are other talks.
Okay, another interesting question. If the master refuses to conduct a physical inspection due to COVID outbreak, how would the port state control deal with the master or owner?
I don't think a master can refuse the physical inspection. He can refuse the remote inspection. From our side, we were the proper PPE to conduct the physical inspection. For instance, in Shanghai MSA, we also have the isolation, all the suits, as well as the face mask and the gloves for all of those. Also, all PSUs are, I think, the vaccine. After they come back, they will go to the quarantine room for themselves. So I don't think the master can refuse the physical inspection. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one of the final ones. So we got about 5 minutes left, so I'm choosing here. Based on your comments, it seems that an internet problem is automatically an indication to you to detain the vessel, isn't it?
Sorry, can you say again?
Well, the question is, based on your comments, it seems that an internet problem is automatically an indication to you to detain the vessel. Is that correct?
I think, just as I mentioned previously, normally we conduct the detention via the remote, very few, unless some very obvious evidence was found, then we will detain via remote way. So also I mentioned that according to the data analyst, that the detention ratio is very low compared with the physical inspection. That's also the reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can just help Mr. Hu a bit. I think it could be a slight misunderstanding. I think what Mr. Hu previously mentioned is that when the remote inspection is being conducted and then a serious deficiency is identified, there are situations where the ship's crew actually turn off the internet, which actually, resulted in the inspection being unable to carry on, or it can actually circumvent that situation when evidence can be recorded that the serious deficiency actually occurred. So that is the case. Maybe that is what I understand, but usually if the internet is not working, probably we have to wait until the internet can be resumed, or as I mentioned earlier, there are other means like you can take photos, you can take videos, then you go back to a place, a location on board the ship where the internet can be resumed, then you upload the picture to the PSUs for evidence, and it's for him to review and to accept the evidence. Thank you.
Okay, this is a related question. As per guideline for remote PSC inspections, you need to have mutual agreement between the captain and the port state control officer. What will you do if the captain does not answer the call, or he just talk and say there's no internet on the ship?
I think just leave it. Does Mr. Chen agree with me?
Yeah, for this case, is either the master is up to some mischief that he doesn't want PSC to actually check vessel, and then also he probably has some knowledge about how remote PSC inspection is carried out. Then he mentioned that we have no internet and so on. In that case, we will not conduct remote PSC inspection on that vessel, but that doesn't prevent the ship from coming in and then we do a physical inspection. So the discretion is still up to us. So if you don't want remote, then we do physical. That's my view. Thank you.
Also, in China, the ship has to be quarantined at the anchorage. After that, then the PSU come on board.
Okay.
It takes the quarantine time of the ship.
Very good. Thank you all. Claudia, any final comments? I think we're reaching the end. We got 1 minute left, and I don't want to keep all of you over. You're very busy and important people. Claudia, you have any final comments, since our two port state inspectors have answered more of the questions and they were directed more to them?
Well, I think my final question is that it is important for the industry that to understand that remote surveys and inspection is our way to offer that we have an alternative to physical inspection. However, it has to follow the scope, and if for whatever reasons the scope cannot be fulfilled, then we go back to default, which is physical inspections or physical surveys. So this is I think a great opportunity and a great tools to bridge the time, and I'm also sure that there will be a hybrid afterwards, but I cannot see that it will be only remote inspections and remote surveys in the future.
So we can look forward to more IMO rules that'll probably produce a hybrid system. So it's disasters pushing technology, which pushes regulation, I think. And perhaps everybody's job will be a little bit easier after this. But it leaves me to thank the three speakers. I found it extremely interesting, and you're very forthright and honest in your answers, and I think the audience would appreciate that. So I think we can deem this one a great success, and I thank again the Maritime and Port Authority for organizing this with us. And I especially thank our speakers, Mr. Hu in Shanghai, and Mr. Chen here in Singapore, and Ms. Ohlmeyer in Germany. But with that, I'd like to thank the audience, and I'd like to again thank our speakers and to Dawoon and Jerry and the staff at CIL and our MPA Academy people who helped us organize this. We all thank you all very much.